Gotta turn that camera around.
All right, find your seat, take a seat. Find your seat, take a seat. Had kind of an easy warm up. Whoa, come on, my turn. Welcome to Monday. Here we go. Just a little reminder of the ground rules. Obviously, it's the same thing we did on Friday. We're just going through the other 4. We did 1 through 4, now we're doing 5 through 8. We are talking about Age of Discovery explorers. Do you remember the big dividing line that determined, really kind of determined the fate of where some of these explorers went? Do you remember what that line was called?
Gold, God.
All right, just pointing out a different term. God, gold, and glory. Those were what? The why, yeah, the motivations. And the 3 G's makes it like a nice Baptist sermon, right? God, gold, and glory. I was opening the conversation to the line, the physical line on the map that determined this country goes that way and this other country goes another way. You remember what that line was called?
What's the line from?
Line of
Yeah.
demarcation. All right, we'll work on that term. Line of demarcation. Who determines this line of demarcation? The Pope. That's right. Oh, so we have religion kind of playing referee for, I don't know, the whole world, right? Not just for one country, not just for Catholics, but the Pope is literally playing referee for the whole world. So this line of demarcation, and on my map here, I gotta try to do it as straight as I can. It kind of catches a little corner of eastern South America. Maria's getting the red dot on her over and over. So this line of demarcation, who gets to go to the west? Opposite. To the west is the Portuguese. Excuse me, I'm sorry. To the west, to the east. I'm pointing east. To the east is who? Portugal, and then to the west is Spain. I had, the way you guys are oriented, the way I'm oriented, kind of gets me mixed up sometimes. Portugal got to go this way. Spain gets to go this way. Now, when I say Spain and Portugal, does that mean people born in Portugal are the ones who go to the west? East? Huh? Yeah, it's about sponsorship. What was the comparison I made? Kind of a modern day comparison. Huh? A sports analogy, yeah. You start with one team, but you move around in your career. Kind of like being a free agent, or getting traded, or, these days with big contracts and contract holdouts and whatever. It's almost like it doesn't matter what team drafted you. You can choose what team you want to go to if you have enough street cred, if you have enough power to do so. So a lot of these guys were born in one country, but that didn't stop their spirit of exploration. They kind of shopped themselves around until they found a government, and a lot of times that was a king and a queen, a monarchy, to actually sponsor them. So that's why we have some guys born in Portugal but exploring to the west, or vice versa. Today we're going to see some Englishmen and how they got into the game and under what flag, etc. So that is, with that as my setup, we got 4 to get to today. And first up is John Cabot. Number 5, John Cabot. I think I do not have a presentation for you. Okay. So John Cabot, you have the floor. Go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Come on up to the front of the room, all that kind of stuff. All right, they paid attention to you. Now you pay attention to them.
The name of our explorer is John Cabot. He represented England. He was an Italian explorer and navigator. He was born in the year 1450 in Vienna, Italy. He died in 1499. In 1497, Cabot traveled to Canada with business for Asia. Cabot and his new crew sailed west and north, taking the route to Asia due shorter to northern Europe than Columbus voyage. 50 days into the voyage, Cabot landed on the east coast of North America. His expedition proved a shorter route across the Atlantic Ocean.
Even though John Cabot was not born in England, he still led English ships on voyages and discovery into the time. Some interesting facts about him are that he is usually one of the reasons why so many people speak English today in North America. Another interesting fact is that he had several names that he went by, though his real Italian name was Giovanni Collada. Another interesting fact about him is that there's no complete biography of him. There are years, even decades missing that historians do not know about. What we do know is that he was active around 1497 and 1498, the time of his origin.
John Cabot, known for discovering the Newfoundland. John Cabot went on this journey to find a way to get to Asia. He wanted to reach the riches of Asia and wanted to find more opportunities and become successful. He knew that if he went on this journey and if the rumors were true that he would be rich in gold, gems, spices, and silver.
Snaps for Giovanni Caboto. Did you catch me say that the first time? Ask him a couple questions. What questions you got? How would you summarize it in a tweet?
What did y'all get?
Main accomplishment. How would you summarize it in just like a tweet? You know, a single sentence.
He got it. He found
Comparable to, maybe comparable to Christopher Columbus. Yeah, he had the same idea. He just started out a little bit more to the north. I'll show you on a map here in just a second. Now, he was born what nationality? Italian, comparable to Christopher Columbus, but he sailed for England. Okay, so now we do have England in the game. And again, this is where world history starts to support U.S. history. John Cabot is almost the beginning of what will become the English colonies in America. Now I say Canada, but at this time borders haven't been decided really yet. So North Canada and then the east coast of America. Englishman John Cabot kind of brings that about to be. All right, snaps for John Cabot. Snaps for John Cabot. I'll elaborate a little bit here. Here's what I think you should write down. Claimed parts of Canada for England. So for the first time, we're talking about Canada, right? I said a little bit more to the north. Canada is to the north, whereas Christopher Columbus was a little bit more in the Caribbean. All right, a little bit more in the Bahamas. But essentially, Cabot had the same idea. If I can sail west, I bet I'll hit these spice islands in the Indies that we really care about, right? I want to find these spices, the same kind of spices that you can just go to Food Lion and find all of them on the counter for, right? I will sail to the west. I will risk my life for this treasure of spices. Oops, there's a big landmass there I didn't really think about. So this is yet another example of running into the Americas and maybe misunderstanding where you are, thinking that you've arrived all the way in India, when instead, plunk, you hit yourself right there in America. Now, I kind of already prepped the idea. I already gave you my sports analogy again in our opening conversation. John Cabot's kind of the ultimate free agent, right? When the big players are Spain and Portugal, he's born Italian, but he goes to play for England. And because of that, he, the competition was a little stiff in Spain and Portugal. He said, I'm not going to try to be, number 3 on Spain's team. I'm going to go to England and try to be their number 1. That analogy's working for you. Stick with it. That analogy doesn't work for you. Just know that he was born Italian, much like Christopher Columbus, but he shopped himself around until he really found a home with England. So be like someone drafted by the Yankees, but maybe doesn't find success with the Yankees and goes to that arch rival, that nemesis, the Red Sox, and finds more success there. So John Cabot's kind of the ultimate free agent, shopping himself around like that and finding a home with England. Here's his map a little bit. So I know some of you probably been waiting to draw this map. You can see the point of origin, the starting point of his exploration. This is England. England is this island right here. We pointed at several times the past couple weeks. And Fabian said it pretty well. There's certain parts of his explorations that are lost to history. Why do you think that some, we're in the 1400s, almost the 1500s now? I can understand not having a good grip on some Mesopotamian writings, but why are we missing pieces of John Cabot's history? What do you think? Damaged, lost, didn't keep good records. Now, navigators do have to keep good records, and a lot of these guys, their entire exploration is based off of consistent measurements of the stars, captain's logs on their ships, making sure they have an accurate distance measured every day. So I would say he probably kept good internal records, but he wasn't much of a publicizer. He didn't have much of a hashtag campaign going, if you will, right? He didn't publicize himself very well. So, even if he had captain's logs that maybe were lost and destroyed, we can take a good guess. Maybe some people in Greenland here are like, oh yeah, we saw this Englishman in 1498, but it's kind of lost to history in terms of confirmation. Yes, ma'am.
Where would that be at on the map?
On the map. Okay, so this is, well, maybe this will help you a little bit more. This is Florida, right? We're all familiar with Florida hanging off. This is northern, this is like Maine in into Canada. And then I know the world's a little bit warped here, but this is England. And then this is Greenland. This right here is the tip of Greenland. Have you seen it on your map yet? Show you on your map here. This black chunk, a little bit triangular right at the top, that's the Greenland. That's the tip of Greenland right here. And then come on over to your left and you'll be into North America. So that's where your map is right there. Again, when we flatten the world out, we've got to try to wrap our head around it. Remember that it's round.
How does it flat?
What's that?
How do they think it goes flat across? If you flatten it, just.
That was one of the early myths. The idea would be that at a certain point you'd sail off the edge of the world. That's why these early explorers were so brave. You and I can, we got Google in our back pocket, right? You pull out your little talking box and you have the answers to all of the world literally in your hand. You have the whole world in your hand. These initial explorers, they didn't know anything beyond the world right in front of them. They didn't know anything more than their travels, or at best they could read of someone else who's done something, but maybe they're not quite sure of it themselves. So they had to have a lot of bravery to come up with the idea that that I was not going to sail off the edge of the world, or you know what? I'm going to find out one way or another. I'm going to be the one that figures out if the world is flat or round. So I'm not going to get into all the various sciencey sides of that. We will talk about the scientific revolution coming up, and that is kind of a bit of a crossover into this age. Remember, we don't talk about things that are just happening boom, boom, boom in order. We have a whole lot of crossover in our sections. So the scientific revolution kind of contributes to this time as well. And then tomorrow, we're going to get to some of those new technologies like the compass, right? It was new at one time, really common now. You have a compass on your phone. You might have Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. You might have a little compass that you hold in your hand. But at this time, the magnetic compass was very revolutionary. And the idea of using the Earth's magnetic poles in order to have this little needle point whichever direction you're going, very revolutionary. So getting a little ahead of myself there. All that to say, yeah, these guys had to have a lot of bravery to wonder whether the Earth was flat or round. All right, I've hung out on this a little bit here. Draw the best you can. Big idea is England to Canada. The dashed lines are maybe, right? We're not quite sure about that. But you go ahead and draw that how you see fit. England to Canada is the most important idea. Italian by birth, sailed for England. Fabian said this pretty well. He was born Giovanni Quoto. That sounds very Italian, right? Giovanni. Oh, man, that guy's definitely from Italy. But he changed his name. Why? Wanted to sound more English. I heard some mumble over there. Eric, what'd you say? Who is representing? Trinity, did you chime in on something? Eli? Who else said something? TJ? I love it when Colin, what'd you say? Allie's gonna make sure you get your chance.
He said he would be remembered easier.
He would be remembered easy. Okay, John Cabot. Very English sounding name. A little bit easier to remember. That's what we're going for. Or to fit into his adopted homeland. Right? You don't want to be an outcast from every time you introduce your name. Man, that guy's Italian, and we're not interested in giving him the time of day. I'm not saying that's a good attitude, but that's the way he could have been perceived at that time. So he changed his name. Similarly, Giovanni, John, that's pretty much a synonym. Caboto, Cabot, just change the pronunciation a little bit, but it's so he could fit in. So it's important to remember John Cabot sounds very English, but that is because he changed his name from that. Now here's a radical statement. He was the first European to set foot in North America since the Vikings 500 years previously. Now we haven't even gotten to that. But wait a second. I thought we always got taught Christopher Columbus discovered America. You're telling me John Cabot set foot in America before Christopher Columbus?
I thought you was there.
And then you're gonna tell me that Leif Erikson set foot in the Americas 500 years before these jokers? Man, history books are messed up. Any history book that wrote down Christopher Columbus that discovered America needs to be copied, or it needs to be what? Control deleted. Control deleted. Because what I'm bringing you now, maybe I'm busting some myths in your brain. This is the true history. Not only did Christopher Columbus not discover America, but he was neither. I mean, he didn't even set foot in America, and there's multiple Europeans that got to it before him. Big Idea claimed parts of Canada for England, and he is the reason that you speak English today. John Cabot of England, representing England, is the reason you speak English today. If someone else on the Spanish side had landed a little bit farther north and into the Americas, we may well be speaking España today. Not to mention, myself 2 weeks forward, if Hitler had won in the 40s, you might be speaking German today. But John Cabot is the reason you speak English today. So for that, I'd like to say thank you, John Cabot. All right, Team John Cabot, well done. We've elaborated pretty thoroughly. Let's move on to number 6, Amerigo Vespucci. And you guys do have a presentation, so I'll pull it up here. He's not cute.
That's what Gracie said.
I know.
You can clicker as well because it will advance your slides. All right, you guys have the clicker. You guys have the floor. Pay attention to Team Vespucci.
Amerigo Vespucci. Who? Amerigo Vespucci is an explorer from Florence, Italy, but represented Spain. Amerigo is most known for being the first person to discover South America and recognize that the Americas were distinct continents and not a part of Asia, which led to America being named after him. But he was also known for his discovery of Rio de Janeiro and Rio de la Plata.
Whoa, go back.
Take it. Go ahead.
Vespucci worked for the Medicis first as a banker and later as a supervisor of their ship outfitting business. Through his work, he learned about exploration, a field which was on the rise since the advent of the age of discovery in the early 15th century. His business also led to his meeting with Christopher Columbus in 1496. He made 2 voyages between 1499 and 1503, and possibly a third one in 1503. During his first voyage, he explored the northern coast of South America to well beyond the mouth of the Amazon. Because of his understanding that a new continent had been uncovered following Columbus and subsequent voyages, America was also named after him.
Embarked on his first voyage on May 10, 1497, set off on his second in May 1501. Vespucci departed on another transatlantic journey, which was his third voyage on May 14, 1501. Departing from Cadiz with a fleet of Spanish ships on his first voyage, he sailed through the West Indies and made his way to the mainland of Central America. Vespucci and his fleet arrived back in Cadiz in October 1498. Vespucci embarked on his next expedition as a navigator under the command of Alonso de Ojeda. Crossing the equator, they traveled to the coast of what is now Guyana, where it is believed that Vespucci left Ojeda and went to explore the coast of Brazil. Vespucci set sail for Cape Verde, this time in service of King Manuel I of Portugal, which was Vespucci's third voyage. Vespucci's ships sailed along the coast of South America from Cape San Roque, I don't know what's that. Patagonia. Along the way, they discovered present-day Rio de Janeiro and Rio de la Plata. Vespucci and his fleets headed back via Sierra Leone and the Azores. Sailing again under the Portuguese flag, Vespucci, accompanied by Galonzo Colo, headed back to Brazil. When the expedition didn't make any new discoveries, the fleet disbanded. Vespucci forged ahead, managing to discover Bahia and the island of South Georgia. In the process, soon after, he was forced to prematurely abort the voyage and return to Lisbon, Portugal in 1504.
Amerigo Vespucci was a genuine pioneer of Atlantic exploration and a vivid contributor to the early travel literature of the New World. His voyage of 1501 to 02 is a fundamental importance of the history of geographic discovery. Because of this, his voyages convinced scholars and himself that the newly discovered lands were not a part of Asia but a new world. Vespucci also continued to call the lands modest notice the name America, which stuck and entered into everyday use near the
Now, for Vespucci, do you have any questions for them?
What?
Hang on, I'll give you that in just a second. Give me that in just a
I'm
second.
not ready for all of this.
Homer, please.
So y'all said he sailed for Spain, but it said you also had to return to Portugal. So what was the debacle there? Like, cause y'all said he sailed for Spain, but he had to just came back for
He sailed for Spain, but he was still.
You guys make the jump up. He was that ultimate free agent, right? Born one thing, sailed for Spain, and mid-career, mid-life, however you want to see it, sailed for Portugal on a subsequent voyage. So that ultimate free agent who can't claim just one country, wasn't sailing for national pride necessarily. He was sailing for the guy that would fund him. So it is accurate to say he sailed for both of them. I pulled a good little slide here, sailed for Portugal and Spain. I pulled the line of demarcation slide back up so we can elaborate on that a little bit because it sounds like we need to make sure we understand that. Here is the main idea. Here's what you can write down, what you guys care about. Explored South America, quoting marks, the Americas are named after him. I'm going to give you the very interesting history on that as soon as I move on from this slide. Sailed, explored South America. That's the most important kind of big chunk of land that distinguishes him from others. And the Americas are named after him. Not only did Christopher Columbus not get there first, not only did he not set foot, the thing isn't even named after him. How is he celebrated? Isn't there a whole other country called Columbia? You guys got that more or less? Julia?
Alright, so were the Medici family still a thing then?
Yes,
All right.
absolutely. So again, that crossover. I always do this with my fingers. I hope you guys understand what I'm doing. I'm saying like this is one era that we've talked about, the Renaissance. This is the age of exploration, and there's a crossover. It's not like, oh, you know what? Today the Renaissance is over, and we're going to begin the age of discovery. These time periods overlap each other. So the Medici influence leads into sponsoring patrons, right? Sponsoring these explorers as well.
So they're rich enough to sponsor the explorers.
Yeah. Yeah, the real mob family with Renaissance, multi-talented influence, if you will, right? And there's plenty more there that Mr. Swanson is still reading and learning on his own. Suffice it to say, yes, they had some crossover influence in that regard as well. I'm glad you recognize the word and that you can make that connection. Here's a blow up of the same map that they showed you. What you got? Sure.
It said they, he worked for the Medici family as a banker.
Right.
And went to work for their ship.
Right.
Was that like, that port in Spain or something?
I'm not going to tell you something I don't have all the answers on, but given that their assets were involved in a lot of things, let's just say that shipbuilding was probably one of their influences as well. It's almost like how Disney owns, I don't know, everything, right? Disney owns ESPN, Disney owns ABC. You know, you got the parks, you got the movies, you got the animation. So let's say, I think, Eli, I probably owe you an answer on that one. Sounds reasonable that the Medicis were probably involved in the shipbuilding business as well. Good question. You guys are next level thinkers. When you're going to make me go research something to get you the right answer, that means you're being the next level thinker. Good job. This is a map of his early explorations, and you can see he doesn't land in South America on this particular map. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a good resolution map of the follow-on, but I do want to point out that he explored the Amazon River as well. Not the whole thing. He didn't enter the river and say, I'm going to see how far this thing goes, but he sailed past the mouth of the river. He decided, this is a pretty significant river. I'm going to take note of this and leave, but I'm going to take this information back with me. So he didn't sail the whole thing, but he did explore past the mouth of it. He did go down it a certain amount of ways, and he's credited with being the first one to chart the opening and kind of the idea that there's this massive river in South America. Now, bring it back to the Spanish-Portuguese thing. Brazil. How can a Portuguese guy sail in Brazil? I thought you said they had to go east. Well, here's the line of demarcation that gives Portuguese influence on this eastern end of South America. And if you know anything about the world, what is the dominant language in Brazil? Portuguese. Brazilians in South America speak Portuguese, whereas Central America, Northern South America, Argentina, etc., speaks this, a Spanish version of Spanish, right? A Spain version of Spanish. So this is why I don't want to trip you up, and there's not going to be a tricky test question, okay? I'm just trying to help you as citizens of the world understand. It does not mean Portugal had to go exclusively to the east. They did have this little chunk right here that they could explore. However, what they couldn't explore, what Portugal couldn't explore, was the Bahamas, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Florida, etc. So there's an explanation on that. A little bit more. So Vespucci was Spanish. We say he also sailed under the Portuguese flag. That's accurate. Discovered the Amazon River and South America. He was a good propagandist and a record keeper. He self-promoted. He probably would have done really well on Twitter and Instagram in these days. So, whereas John Cabot was happy to just do his job, take his discoveries back, maybe didn't even publicize his records in a way that we're not sure exactly where he explored. John Cabot more on the quiet side. Amerigo Vespucci, I don't know, if you got a name like Vespucci, you're probably pretty flamboyant. He was a good propagandist, record keeper, self-promoter. He is largely credited more accurately with the discovery of the New World, even more so than Christopher Columbus. Now, hang on to that, because Christopher Columbus's name, I'm not just pumping on the guy, okay? I'm not just dogging on his accomplishments. He was significant, and we are going to see tomorrow and elaborate even more on his legacy through what is known as the Columbian Exchange. But Vespucci, more realistically, actually set foot in the Americas, whereas Columbus just stopped at the islands. And then you may be aware that we don't live in a country called Colombia. We don't live in a country called Caboto. We don't live in a country called Ericksonville. We're about to get to Leif Erikson. We live in a country called America. Have you ever paused to think about why that's what our country's name? Right, we love the 4th of July. We love America, right? Parenthesis, M-E-R, yeah, America, right? We love our country's name, the red, white, and blue. We love our country's name. We got songs about it. We put it on T-shirts. You're going to put it on your social medias because you love America. Well, why is it named what it is named? It is named after Amerigo Vespucci, the first to discover South America. Okay, homeboy didn't even get to North America, but it's still good enough to name both continents. And the reason it's named that, he didn't say, I call this land America and plant the flag. because that wouldn't even make sense. His name's Amerigo. Being a good propagandist, being a good self-promoter, his records were in wide distribution. And when it came time to actually make maps of the New World, that's called cartography. Map making is called cartography. A German map maker said, okay, we now understand there's these big land masses, right? We're not going to say that you go straight from Spain to India anymore. We understand the world a little bit better. So I'm going to make a map that's more accurate. But man, what should I call this chunk of land? That Vespucci guy, Amerigo. I guess he got there first. Well, let's call it, Latin is the dominant language of the day. And typically we name lands in the feminine, right? The motherland. So I'm going to take Amerigo, which is masculine. I'm going to Latinize it to Americo. Nope, I'm going to Latinize it and feminize it, which is America. America. Does that make sense? I said that pretty lengthily. Latin, feminized, America. And originally with the K. I can't really tell you why we changed it to a C, other than that's a little bit of a softer K than the K. But America was first written down and published in the year 1507. And it is because Amerigo Vespucci. The more you know. So next 4th of July, when you're yelling out Americas and freedom bombs and God bless America and all that kind of stuff, you can know that you are singing and saying and declaring the Latinized, feminized version of Amerigo. How about that? Amerigo Vespucci. Leif Erikson, my favorite Viking. You know, the only appropriate way to present Leif Erikson is with the Viking hats. However, inaccurate the horns might actually be. So Team Leif Erikson, come on up.
Can we go to the bathroom?
Yo, yes, good idea. We are going to pause there for the bathroom. Two groups down. When we come back, we'll do Leif Erikson with the Viking hats.
I'm sorry.
Oh, do you want?
My fault.
Really? I don't even know if I've ever.
They kind of just mix
No,
languages.
so it's a South American version of
Yes.
Spanish.
Well, the purpose, fair question. It fits into the big degree, I would say. You know, God will glory, just exploration. The way he shops himself around tells me that he just wanted to be an explorer. He didn't care about. my class, 1206, let's go.
Yeah, who are you talking to? Okay, guys. I'll start presenting. Since you're the only one. Take my picture. Oh, yeah. Mess up my hair.
Well, you woke up. He woke me up. I didn't.
I'm ready.
I just made something.
All right, come back in, settle down.
Stop. What? Just making sure there's no stain.
All right, we back. Who missing?
We're missing Delaney. Delaney!
All right, so check it out. I got a cover for another block, next block, and that's why I had to get situated with that. That's what happens sometimes. All right, so I've got a question from a couple of you. What was his purpose, Vespucci's purpose of exploration? So let me ask the Vespucci group. What would you say? You don't have to at all. Although I think it's awesome.
I look like a with big
Alright,
spider
right back here. Right back here. I know it's awesome to put on Viking hats. Yes. Vespucci group. What do you think was the purpose of his exploration? Where they at? Fame? I'll buy that. Anybody else? Trade. Just a great discovery. What his nation hopping tells me, right? If I'm thinking like a historian and I see that he didn't sail for just one nation, he kind of moved from team to team for whoever would sponsor him. What that tells me is that he was the true adventurer. He wasn't in it for nationalism. He didn't want to plant the flag of his home country. He just wanted to keep exploring. And realistically speaking, now we're real tainted by the idea that Columbus discovered America, right? So you're thinking, oh, America already got discovered. In their world, there was still stuff out there that had not been discovered. Columbus only found some islands. So all things considered, he's like, hey, I have the chance to really still be first. And, he gets the continent named after him because of that. So I would say something along the lines of adventure, discovery, wanting to be first and famous. I think that was Vespucci's why. If someone wants to debate me on that, or some other historian has something else to say, that's fine. But I think that's his big why, his big purpose. Good thoughts. You guys do have a presentation, so let me get that pulled up. Ray, you got to memorize this time?
Please don't expect all of us to have it.
All right. That's your first slide?
Yes.
Present, and the clicker shall work. So pay attention to Leif Erikson, please.
Our explorer was Leif Erikson. Leif Erikson was a
Speak up a little bit.
Leif Erikson was a European explorer born in Iceland. During his early life, he was trained to be a Viking. He later moved to Greenland, which was where his father lived. On one of his expeditions, he traveled to Norway, where he was converted to Christianity by King Olaf I. The king later asked him to go back to Greenland and spread Christianity. So you could say that he sailed for Greenland because he lived there, but you could also say he sailed for Norway because he was spreading Christianity. And unlike what you may have heard, Christopher Columbus did not discover America. Leif Erikson is most known for being the first European to discover America, but he's often overshadowed by Columbus because Vikings did an awful job at writing things down, and most of their accomplishments just became myths and legends. And also, Columbus had a much bigger impact on the Americas than Erikson did.
He named Finland the land he discovered after the abundance of grapes grown there.
Leif Erikson's brother made an expedition to Finland once he returned to Greenland, but all efforts to settle the region failed due to conflicts with the Native American population. 3. Leif Erikson's father discovered Greenland, and when he died, Leif Erikson became the chief of the Greenland settlement. Erikson first started his exploration in 1008. This was 500 years before Christopher Columbus was said to have discovered the Americas. After exploring North America, Erikson never returned to the continent.
Leif Erikson sailed to Norway in 1080. He went to go spread Christianity for King Olaf I. He went to
Like warm
Greenland.
hugs.
He went to Greenland to spread Christianity. On his way back, he went off course. And when he went off course, he ended up in North America. He then explored what he had found, and he called it Vinland because of the abundance of grapes. Leif Erikson's exploration mattered because he was the first European to arrive on North America. He and his crew were the first Europeans to have conflict with the Native Americans. This foreshadows what will soon to happen in the next few hundred years. And after his exploration in North America, Erikson spent the rest of his life converting people to Christianity. Today, there are many conflicts about who really was the first person to land on North America.
This concludes the 5 W's of Leif Erikson.
Snaps for Erikson. Hunga donga donga donga. Anybody seen the SpongeBob version of Leif Erikson?
Yeah.
All right, now you can stay up here, Team Erikson. Ask them any questions you have. What questions do you have?
Hit us with a question. We know.
Pretty solid presentation. What questions do you have?
What year was that? You said that he sailed to North America?
1081.
1080, gotcha. What was the purpose?
What's to convert? I mean, convert.
Let's study to the first one.
So for religion.
You also
Did he
said
represent?
that he called Vinland, right? Because the abundance of grapes. Where actually did he land? Is it more Canada or
What is present day Finland? Did you catch that? Newfoundland. Yep. Now VIN. Why does the abundance of grapes give us the prefix VIN?
like
Vineyard, and a lot of times wine is the Latin word for wine is vino. So Vinland is related to the land of wine. Land of good wine.
What's the nation?
It's not Finland, okay, not to be confused with Finland. VIN-land is it was named so because of the grapes. VIN is a prefix for wine, and it's called the land of wine. That's why. Excellent presentation. Let me have it go ahead. Snap, Leif Erikson. Well done. So if the myth hasn't been busted yet, here it is. I hear glass shattering because anyone who was hanging on to Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, you now have to write this down. Leif Erikson was the first European to set foot in the Americas. The first European to set foot in the Americas. Now, I can keep making the point that did they really discover anything? No, because there were still natives who were already there. But it is accurate to say he was the first European to set foot in the Americas. Still not the United States that we live in today, because it was present-day Canada and Newfoundland that he actually set foot in. And it's very significant that it was significantly before the legend of Christopher Columbus discovering America. The nice round number is 1000 AD. A lot of times you also will see 999 AD, like that's when they started their exploration. But 999, 1000, pretty clean, nearly 500 years before Christopher Columbus and the rest of Europe started to set across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, why do you think that some Scandinavian Vikings, this is Scandinavia, Greenland, Iceland, etc., why do you think some Scandinavian Vikings were the first to go west and run into the continent of North America?
Because they were Baltic.
They were a little closer. This is true. Okay, so traditional Europe. Now this is Europe as well, but traditional Europe is just it's that much farther away. The ocean is that much longer versus this Greenland continent that was just a little bit closer to North America. Why else?
They might have known that it existed.
Might have had some evidences that it already existed, whether migration patterns of animals, or if they're studying the currents, they could think that there's probably a body of land out there that's causing these currents to do what they're doing near our land. Kurt, that's a great thought. What do we tend to think about Vikings' sense of adventure? Conquerors, yeah. Can I just point out that this whole horns thing is outrageously inaccurate, right? So down to our own selves being the Red Raiders and horns up and all that stuff. The horns thing is very, very, very modern myth, I guess. The idea would be that, this makes Vikings look so tough. But if you actually go back to, now this is a piece of art, of course, not a photograph, but Leif Erikson doesn't have any horns on his helmet. The whole Viking horn thing is pretty recent mythology because we think it makes them look tougher. Now, that's not to say the Vikings weren't interested in being tough conquerors, but they also had a more level idea about, we just want to explore these lands. We're not as brutish. Real Vikings are not as brutish as the mythology we give to them. So that's a little side fact there. And I know I always perpetuate the myth by just having these hats in the room. Y'all think, Vikings have horns. Here's a map for you a little bit. You can see, now this is a little bit extra on European history. Interesting facts. Hang on to them if you will. Iceland. What do you think, if you didn't know anything else, what would you think about Iceland?
It's green.
Full of ice. Guess what? It's actually very green. Greenland. What do you think you know about Greenland?
I bet it's
Ice. Guess what? It's very ice, baby.
That's iconic.
It's very icy. They named it Greenland so that people would be interested in coming there. Plot twist. It's so these two are literally opposites based on what their name would suggest that they are. Yeah, that's right. So you guys gave a really good why, and you said several different countries: Iceland, Greenland, Norway. They weren't operating off of sponsorship in quite the same way that we've been discussing with these other explorers. These Scandinavian countries, well, yeah, there was national identity and there were borders and boundaries. They really kind of believed, they saw themselves to be regional. So it wasn't quite the same thing as competitive with another country. So the King of Norway sponsoring him wasn't quite as free agent hopping as some of these other explorers that I've been describing. You guys did pretty well on describing their big why. Why did Leif Erikson set out to discover something else? Spread Christianity is what Brecken says. Jayla, what you got? Pretty close to that? Okay. This is, so for the reading I've done, and if I can bring you any level of historical expertise, I think that was genuinely one of their motivations. Not as a cover, not as trying to sell the mission or sell the expedition to the Queen Isabella like Columbus did. Oh yeah, and I'm going to go spread Christianity too. I think that was genuinely part of their motivation, the starting point of their motivation. And I really believe that because they never returned. These Vikings never returned to Vinland or North America. It's as if they completed their mission, did their little missionary work, and returned to Iceland and, returned back to their lives. So I think that they weren't out for the conquering aspect of it. They weren't out for planting their flag. It was almost like, what's out there? Are there people that need to hear the message of Christianity, which is what we believe in? Let's go see. Now, what is a big reason that 500 years goes by and these guys don't really get credit for being in North America? They didn't write it down. Vikings, and then more than just this little factoid, Viking culture at large was not good record keepers. It's almost as if they were just content to live in their time and in their world, the opposite of Amerigo Vespucci, a propagandist who wants to make his name famous. The Vikings just did what they did without keeping good records. So even in an advanced civilization, right, you could say 1000 AD, well, they could have been writing stuff down on paper. They could have even been printing it, not with movable type, but with pressed, handwritten records, right? It wasn't their thing. It just wasn't a part of their national identity. It wasn't part of their ethnic identity to keep good records. So takes a long time for the world to discover that these Vikings actually got there before Christopher Columbus did. Now, I think you guys used this word. If you didn't, there's a lot of kind of disputed ideas as to whether this really happened or is it mythological. Did you say something to that effect? What did you read about that?
I just read that since they didn't write all their stuff down, after a lot of time went by, they believed it could have just been myths or legends.
Sure, yeah, just like the horns on their helmets. Now, there is a fair amount of evidence of early Viking settlements in these regions of Canada and Newfoundland, present-day Newfoundland. So I personally believe that these were expeditions that did happen based on the reading and research I've done. So take that with whatever level of expertise you think I have. I do think that Leif Erikson and the Vikings were the first to get to North America. And for all the reasons we've said, they just didn't get credit for it till a lot of time later. A little bit extra on Leif Erikson. He's the son of Eric the Red, another famous Viking. So it's almost like, John Adams and then his son, John Quincy Adams. They're both presidents, right? They're a famous American family. Or the Bushes, President Bush, or President George H.W. Bush, President George W. Bush. Same thing here. Same thing here is that the dad birthed an iconic son. So Eric the Red and Leif Erikson, they are the same, or they're from the same family. You also saw that his brother was involved in exploration. Landed in Canada, named it Vinland, modern day Newfoundland. Poor record keeper, explored for adventure, not fame. So there's your big why there. You put Christianity, but explored for adventure and missionary work, not fame, such as many of these other Europeans. So you're telling me that Christopher Columbus, 1, didn't discover America, 2, America isn't named after him, and 3, he literally never set foot in America. Is that what we're deciding? Is that where we're at? Is that what we can agree to? The answer has to be yes. That is what we're saying. So myth busted, glass shattering, Christopher Columbus did not discover America like maybe you thought, or maybe you even been taught for so long.
Mr. Swanson, I need Alice and Matters for checkout, please.
On her way. All right, doing good on time. Got 1 to go. Team Lewis and Clark, come on up.
Come on, y'all got the easiest one. Lewis and Clark.
Okay. Who's getting up first?
Are you ready? Are you ready? Yeah, that's right.
No.
All right, my friends, a big upfront disclaimer. Lewis and Clark do not traditionally fit into the age of exploration. Swanson is teaching something outside of the chunk of time that we're in. Why do you think that I like to include Lewis and Clark in this conversation on the age of discovery?
Explore most of the Midwest that we know today.
Okay. Oh, so I'm making it relevant to you. Explore our chunk of the world, right? Trying to give you a personal interest in discovery. Julia, you said what?
They discovered
Discover most of America.
I thought that was a video game.
You thought Lewis and Clark was a video game?
No, that's
the Oregon Trail.
Oregon Trail is a video game. This is true.
There's a movie about it.
A movie about Lewis and Clark? You have to tell me about that one. I'm not sure about that. So the reason I really think it's important for us to talk about Lewis and Clark inside of the age of discovery is, 1, their adventurer spirit certainly fits into this idea of discovery. 2, their team, the expedition they set out on, I hope I'm not stealing any information from you, is called the Corps of Discovery. Corps means team, the Corps of Discovery, the team of discovery. So they are discoverers. They're definitely discoverers. And then 3, European exploration fits into world history, which is the class you're in. Lewis and Clark and the Corps of Discovery fits very well into American history. And this is kind of a preset for teaching you U.S. history, which is a really important class you'll take next year, EOC, all that stuff. So I'm using this concept of the age of discovery to launch a little bit further and talk about Lewis and Clark. So that's my upfront disclaimer. No, they're not from Europe. No, they're not they're not in the 14 and 1500s. They're later than that, but they're in the same spirit of these discoverers we've been talking about. So Lewis and Clark, go ahead.
Okay, our presentation is on Lewis and Clark. Lewis and Clark's full names are Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. These two men traveled from early stage America to discover more land.
Lewis and Clark both represented America. Lewis was born in Virginia but spent his childhood in Georgia. He returned to Virginia as a teenager. Clark was also born in Virginia but moved to Kentucky as a teenager.
Lewis and Clark were mostly known for their expedition to the Pacific Northwest of the newly purchased Louisiana Territory.
The exertion lasted over 2 years, and some things Lewis had confronted during the time was harsh weathers, injuries, starvation, diseases, both friendly and hostile natives, and more.
The 8,000-mile journey was huge, which provided lots of new things, such as new geographic, ecological, and social info about uncharted areas in North America.
They brought back journals filled with details about Native Americans and notes about animals and plants they had never seen before.
Their expedition began in 1804 in St. Louis, Missouri. It ended in 1806 in Columbia.
The purpose of this expedition was to explore the area of the Louisiana Purchase and the West Coast.
Excellent. Well done. Lots of info there. Ask them a couple questions.
He lost
No, the Oregon Trail happened when the Indians had to move.
Yeah.
So this is not the same thing as the Oregon Trail. Let me preface this for you. These guys were the first Americans to walk out west. They paved the way for other settlers who would migrate to the west and find new land, new farming, new adventure. But this was the first time, hard for us to imagine, because we can just get in a car and go. But this was the first time that American former colonists, right? We're talking about a really young nation here. Americans are like, man, I wonder what's west of the Appalachian Mountains. Let's go find out. Eric?
So they bought parts of Louisiana?
Well, that's where Thomas Jefferson made the Louisiana Purchase.
I will explain
Where they buy it from?
I will explain the Louisiana Purchase.
Oh, I know.
Oh, he knows. Go for it.
No,
Approach.
I know.
Teach your classmates.
French.
No, it's funny.
Stare each other down.
French.
You know how much they bought? $25 million.
It's for a set amount of money.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Dog.
Oh, look,
In the
All right, any on-topic questions? Not stump and chump? I'm taking my clicker back. All right, TJ, what you got?
Is it on topic? It's a fact about something.
Ask me. Yeah, ask me. Good job, guys.
That's not really a question. I just wanted to say that I read somewhere that Lewis. Yes, I read. But, well, Lewis and Clark were writing down what they seen. They came upon a tribe of Native Americans, and after Sacagawea told them that it's okay. They're not here to do anything messed up. They greeted them, and they were really interested in what all Lewis and Clark had, like their guns, and especially in George, their slave, because they had never seen a colored man before.
York. His name was York. Very good.
The book said George.
Okay. Maybe it goes by two things. I guess. I know it is York. Continue. Excellent.
And it went into detail about like his about how they're like greeting, how the Native Americans greeted them. They would they had like a specific way after Sacagawea had explained to the Native Americans that they weren't dangerous. The leader got down and he hugged, I think it was Lewis, a certain way. He put his left arm around around Lewis's right shoulder, put his cheek to his face, and made a scream.
Okay. So that would be. They said they made three discoveries in three main categories. Which category would that fit under?
Cultural.
Cultural, they said social. Yeah, cultural, so ecological, geographical, and social discoveries, cultural discoveries. Very good, TJ. There are thousands of super interesting facts about Lewis and Clark expedition. I'm going to give myself about 10 minutes to nerd out on it with you here. And then if I manage my time well, I got a video I can show you as well that, my disclaimer was this is not fit into the European exploration, but it's super important to your lives, and it still fits into the idea of discovery. So here's the big thought here. They were, if you wrote down anything similar, you're good. Commissioned by Thomas Jefferson to explore the Louisiana Purchase. I'll hang out on the definition of the Louisiana Purchase for a second here. We purchased this chunk of land from France in the year 1803 for the price of $15 million. And what that amounts to is about pennies per acre, cents per acre. Like these days, an acre goes around here about $6,000, right? Acreage is expensive these days, and obviously you're talking about inflation and such like that. But we bought this whole chunk of what is now the heart of the United States for $15 million, which amounted to pennies on the acre. I'll show you a picture here. At the time, 1803, this was the United States, right? And I'm bleeding into U.S. history a little bit. If you're in my class next year, we'll spend a lot of time explaining all the lands that we acquired. But summary here, the original 13 colonies, right? After the war, we expand a little bit all the way to the Mississippi River. The British leave, we get land all the way up to the Mississippi River. France has claims to this purple region right here. Well, France is being led by Napoleon at this time, the famous Napoleon. Napoleon is dynamite, but no Bonaparte. Napoleon is fighting wars all over the world, and we're going to talk about that a couple steps from now, okay? Napoleon needs money. Bottom line is Napoleon needs money. So he is willing to sell this major chunk of what is the future United States to Thomas Jefferson for cash, right? He's willing to trade geography for cash, and of course that doesn't, in the end, super beneficial to the United States, and it gets France to leave our continent forever, right? French actual influence leaves the continent forever. This still belongs to Spain, Spanish, and Mexico. Not going to get into it. This is still British territory. Not going to get into it. That's part of U.S. history. But what we purchased instantly doubled the size of the United States. Major takeaway of the Louisiana Purchase is that it doubled the size of the United States immediately. Pink and purple is now what is the United States. So back to Lewis and Clark. They start in St. Louis, Missouri. Does anybody know the nickname for St. Louis, Missouri to this day? Gateway to the West. That's right. Why is it called that? It's not very west. I mean, it's darn near in the Eastern time zone. Why do we call it the Gateway to the West? So that's where they started from. What is really, what's a nice little monument that's in St. Louis? The Gateway Arch. It's as if, now that wasn't present at this time, but it's symbolic of them walking through the gates into the West. That's why that's in St. Louis. So the more you know, St. Louis. And then their route generally goes like this. Now they could not possibly, this is a bit of a blow up, they could not possibly explore everything, right? They didn't touch Texas. They didn't touch Oklahoma. They didn't even get to New Orleans, which was kind of a big motivator for the purchase. We wanted the port of New Orleans. But the line there, and I like that it puts it over states here so you can kind of actually see what states they walked through. This is the path that they followed, about 3,700 miles, right, in total. You can see that the teams even split at certain points. No cell phones, no text messages, no GPSs. They had to say, all right, 3 months from now, we'll try to meet you at the next little location, right? That's a big part of the sense of discovery, is that there's a whole lot of uncertainty going on. In fact, at a certain point, it was believed that the whole exploration was lost. Thomas Jefferson records in his journal, haven't heard from Lewis and Clark in a long time. They must be dead, right? We'll have to send out someone else to try to discover the Louisiana Territory, to explore the Louisiana Territory. Well, that's not the case. They didn't die. They do come back. They come back with journals. They come back with specimens. They come back with samples of rocks and trees and plants and fish that they found way out west. They discovered things that had never been seen before in America, like moose and grizzly bears. So Thomas Jefferson, when they come back, he's like, wow, this is what I purchased. Okay, pretty cool. Something something else really cool about them. I'm trying to find the picture I want. I'm going to go back to this right here. So, famous other characters on their team. I told you that their team is called the Corps of Discovery. Lewis and Clark, a lot of times we throw those two names together. Yeah, they were the leaders of this team. But let's, just like you guys are a team in this room, just like any of your sports teams aren't just one or two people, they had a team with them. Famous members of their team include Sacagawea. Now, she didn't start with them. They found her. There's a lot of legends about Sacagawea, but realistically speaking, she was probably 14 or 15 years old. She was married to a French fur trader. Remember, this territory was all French at the beginning. So part of their mission was also telling Frenchmen, like, hey, by the way, you don't belong here anymore. This is owned by America now. Anyway, Sacagawea, married to a French fur trader. She's pregnant at this time, right? She's with child.
At
So
14?
she actually, yes, and that's cultural differences. I'm not going to get into that. She's a valuable member of the team for a lot of reasons. One, she knows the land better than they do, right? They are trying to discover it, but guess what? She's already lived it. So she can help them on the trails and the rivers and the mountains. She can help them navigate. Two, when this group of white, hulking men with weapons showed up to any new village or tribal area, and they had a young female with them, she kind of helped them make peace. Whereas if she wasn't present, everyone else might have been like, wow, these guys are trying to conquer and kill us. But the young lady was able to say, we're coming in peace and we're just trying to discover this area. Also, she spoke the language. So Sacagawea, incredibly valuable, and she is remembered in our American history. She's on a coin. She's on the dollar coin, and she's remembered very well in our American history. Side fact number 2, TJ kind of opened this up. This is the slave York. I've read it as York. If he goes by George, maybe that's him kind of taking on a more English type name. York was a black man who was a slave. York was a slave in America. Where was York not a slave? As soon as they stepped west. So it is said that as soon as they passed through the gateway of St. Louis, as soon as they set foot into Louisiana Territory, which is not governed by American law, York was no longer treated or even seen as a slave. York was seen as a member of the expedition and a very valuable member of the expedition. He was a hunter. He was a tracker. He gathered food. He cared for the sick. He was one of the strongest members of the team. So when you're in the wild, when you're out there with nothing else but just your team, man, it doesn't matter what color you are or what the laws back in the country are. It just matters what you can do. So a pretty early example, and we still got a long way to go until we abolish slavery, but a pretty early example of people realizing these people aren't slaves. They're people just like us. So a very important conversation that kind of starts to be had here. Why are we enslaving Black Africans? They're not worth less. They are worth just as much, which of course is the correct answer. A little bit more, make sure I said everything I want to say. They explored, mapped, cataloged, new information acquired along the Louisiana Purchase. They also informed the French and the English of the sale. So, by the way, you're in America now, and you got to get moving along. Now, they explore all the way into this English territory. Oregon and Washington, this doesn't belong to the United States yet. So in a way, you might say that they went outside the boundaries of what they had purchased, but they wanted to get all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Because there's this major idea in American history, the concept of the United States called manifest destiny. Anybody know what that means?
The movie. The show.
Is that a show?
Manifest destiny.
No, it's just not.
You might think about destiny. What is it to manifest? This is the belief, and it's starting to grow at this time period, 1803, when we buy the Louisiana Territory. It's the belief that America, the United States, is destined by God's will to spread from sea to shining sea. So even though this isn't our land, and this is not yet our land, there's some disputed territory here and here, by God, it is God's divine will that these United States will spread from sea to shining sea. Get a little ahead of myself here, but we're going to have to kick some people out of their homes in order to do that. So was it really God's will that we do all of that? Stick around for U.S. history because manifest destiny is a very, very interesting concept. All right, Lewis and Clark, well done. You guys did really good. I'm going to show this video that we're not going to get all the way through, just because it's going to throw out some interesting facts, more than even what I've said so far. So just, you can wrap your notes up. Well done. I will collect them on Friday, because you're going to need them for the rest of the week. So pay attention to this video as we finish out our time.
1803, Thomas Jefferson bought 28,000 square miles of land from Napoleon's France. Known as the Louisiana Purchase, the transaction drastically increased the size of the United States.
Doubled it.
The general public had mixed emotions about the deal. So to help win support, Jefferson ordered an expedition